What does that mean exactly, that we were living from our ego while being disconnected from ourselves? Well, here are a few questions that point in the right directions. When we are living from our ego and disconnected from ourselves, who is in the driver's seat? Whose thoughts, emotions, and perceptions do you experience at any given time? And which bigger vision are you following? When we are living from our ego and we are somehow identifying with different parts of us, with which part are we identifying at any given time? Are we identified with the scary part? Are we identified with the sad part? Maybe with a little child who just didn't feel accepted or loved enough? Are we identifying with an absolutely random part, like the all body tattooed kind of guy that we have absolutely no idea what is his role in our life? And these are just generic examples, but we have many, 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 many parts, many fragments of our ego that throughout our life we identify with, we blend with. And blend is a terminology that is used in the internal family system framework to describe when the whole of you is actually identifying with one specific part, with one part only. And when that happens, then you're getting only a piece of the whole picture. Actually, the bigger picture gets completely lost, because when you're blended with one part, you're thinking, feeling, acting as that one part, taking that one perspective only. And as to complicate matters, other parts might want to get in control because they don't actually maybe feel very good about the part you're blended with. Or maybe they feel that that part is not doing a good job, or maybe that part is doing a job they disagree with. Because as we said, each part has its own wants and its own needs and its own way to help us through life. Or maybe there are other parts who feel overwhelmed and therefore they are feeling fearful or they're feeling helpless, but they're somehow lingering in the background. We are not consciously aware of those other parts. So they are affecting us emotionally. We are not aware of them. We are just blended with one part who might be doing different things for us. Maybe we are blended with our inner critic, which, by the way, that happens really, really, really often. So we are just blended with this continuous flow of statements and list of things that we're not doing well enough, that we should get doing in the near future, worries about the future, rumination about the past, and that kind of things. So how do we deal with this? If we spend a long part of our life disconnected from ourselves and blended with different parts, usually it's one or twice at a time, and just, switching from one part to the other. A good example of that is when you are blended with your inner critic. And so you are thinking those toxic thoughts about you not. This morning, I didn't manage to do the laundry, just by the way, real story. I forgot to do the laundry. I should have really done the laundry. And then that might attach to other thoughts about, oh, I always forget to do things, not good enough. And then sometimes that switch happens in which you go from the role of criticizing yourself to a different mode in which you actually feel overwhelmed, in which you just feel that, that helplessness, the dread of not being enough. It's not anymore you telling yourself that you're not enough. It's you feeling that you're not enough. It's feeling like that little child you once were who was trying to do all the perfect and right things to impress mommy or daddy and kept falling short. So that's a very good example of when we're blended to one of our parts, and then we just seamlessly blend with another one. And that's something that happens so seamlessly in our day-to-day life that we don't even notice it unless we have actually trained ourselves in noticing that, unless we have built a kind of an awareness around it. When we are connected to ourselves and we let it show the way, that we have clarity and we feel grounded, we feel at peace, and we just know where we are at. We know what we want. We know how we feel, how we want to feel, and our individual parts can thrive. They can bring us wherever we want to go. The thing is that we want the self to take the lead. But how do we do that if we've been disconnected from ourselves since a long time? And I know that many of you might have this feeling that the self is this abstract, unreachable kind of thing. And you might have read about things like ego dissolution and just being in self without the ego. You might have read about just living from your higher self or living as your best possible self. And I believe that these ways of talking about it are very confusing because they somehow imply the possibility of us living without our ego, as if our ego is evil, as if our ego is what leads to all the negative emotions or all the negative results that we see in our life. Well, it's not like that. First of all, we cannot live with our ego. The ego is a social construct. Each and every human being has an ego, and we just cannot choose or decide that we don't want it anymore. Let's toss it on the side. It just doesn't work like that. And at the same time, the self and the ego can work together to get you everywhere you want to go, to give you everything you want to. But the thing is, the ego has been functioning without the self for a very long time, and many of your parts just took over unhealthy roles, maladaptive roles for protection, for solving problems that maybe you had when you were 7 years old and now actually would not even be needed anymore, not in the way that they're functioning. So it's not about getting rid of the ego. It's about reconnecting to the self, which is not this abstract thing a lot of people talk about. And we're gonna go into the details of that very soon. But it's about somehow help your different parts to take over healthier roles, to get used again to follow the lead of the self, so that self and ego can work together and truly make the totality of who you are in that seamless way that now your parts are functioning, but while being shown the way by the self. So how do we do that? Well, it all starts with imagining an armchair. And as I'm a lover of Alice in Wonderland romances, I clearly picked an armchair that comes from Alice in Wonderland with the beautiful cat on top of it. But you can imagine your own armchair, whatever really fits your style or what feels comfortable and right for you. So we're going to call this armchair the seat of your consciousness. You can just imagine as if at the very center of your being, there is an armchair. And usually, this armchair can only take one person. There cannot be like 20 people crowded in one armchair. Usually, it's just one. It's also possible that there is one person and then another one is kind of squeezing in from the side. That's not very comfortable, but that's a possibility. So let's imagine that you have this armchair, and this armchair is your seat of consciousness. What does that mean? It means that that's the place from which you are consciously seeing things. Well, let's say more or less consciously. Let's say that's the place from which you are functioning from. So in this armchair, there could be the scary part, there could be the sad part, there could be the inner critic, or there could be yourself. So this is your seat of consciousness. Whoever is sitting on this armchair somehow has the control of your thoughts, of your beliefs, of your emotions and your actions. And therefore, it also kind of leads to the results that you see in your life. If your inner critic is sitting on this armchair most of the time, then you're going to live from a place of uncertainty, of self-doubt, of never enough, of scarcity, of just feeling dreadful with who you are, because all you keep doing is just criticizing everything that you do, that you see in other people, not just in yourself, in the whole world. So it's about just getting this very basic understanding that you can only function from one part or from self. So imagine that you're observing it all from higher ground. That's the easiest possible way to connect to yourself. I know it doesn't sound like the sexy self that they talk about. We are gonna get into talking to that other kind of self when we do our guided inner exploration. So when you actually will be able to get messages from very deep down into your core and your essence. But for now, a skill that is going to be extremely useful in doing this all is to imagine that you're observing things from a higher ground. And by the way, I just love that picture. Thing that also kind of helps us taking things a little less seriously, because that's also very important. And so why do we observe it from a higher ground? Well, that's because when you're observing things from a place of curiosity, then you're not completely blended with one part only. Maybe that part is still sitting on the armchair, but be sure that the self is pushing there from the side. You can evaluate thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and understand where they come from, because you're just taking a higher stand. You can connect to the bigger picture. You can access the qualities of self, and you can lead the conversation with your parts from the self and not while being blended with the part, because those are two very different perspectives. Is the difference that it makes from I am not enough to, oh, this part of me feels like it is not enough. And I feel compassion for it. I can be with it. But I know that I am enough. And that makes a very big difference. The second way of kind of knowing whether you are in self, whether the self is sitting in your armchair, is to check on which qualities are you feeling consciously in your mind, but also physically into your body. When you feel calm, when you feel compassion, curiosity, courage, creativity, connection, and confidence and clarity, then you are embodying the qualities of self. When you feel any of these and don't feel anything else, then you know that you are in self only. When you can look at this part of you who feels not enough, and you can look at it with curiosity in trying to understand why does it feel like that, and with compassion, I am sorry that you feel like that, then you also have clarity. And at the same time, you can think differently about it and you can act differently in your life. While when you feel fear, when you feel doubt, when you feel anxiety, when you feel a lot, when you feel anger, and when you feel judgment, then that's a very clear signal that you are blended with a part of you as well, who somehow is feeling those emotions. And so this is a very important differentiation for you to just get a feeling about whether is myself sitting in my seat of consciousness or a part is sitting there. And this is quite important because when you talk to your parts, when we will talk to your parts for most of this boot camp, you want to make sure that there is enough self present to show the way, to lead the conversation. We're gonna repeat this again so that it doesn't get forgotten and so that we can always check briefly after we identify a part to ensure that we are observing the part from self, embodying these qualities, rather than being blended with that part or judging that part from another part that blended with us. And I hope this doesn't feel too complicated because actually it is not complicated when you do it then in real life. So the totality of you are yourself, which is needed in order to lead and to bring clarity, and your ego, which is needed to function in any possible circumstance. And only when they are together and they work together, then there can be a wholesome you. There can be a you who feels whole, who feels free and at peace, and who can get everything that you want in life.